What's good, everybody? My name is Sweat, and we're back talking NFL Pick'ems Week 18. I know Christmas is over, but I'm not going to be able to wear this for another 12 and a half months, so it is what it is. I hope you guys had a great Christmas and a Happy New Year, and it's playoff time. I had a good week last week. I went 14-2, but this week coming up is going to be kind of tricky because there's a lot of teams that are resting their starters, and it's kind of difficult to pick no matter if the teams aren't very good or they already didn't make the playoffs or not. So we'll see if I can get it done. This is the last week that I have a chance to go 16-0. So let me just run through my picks real quick from last week, starting off with the Christmas game, Steelers and Chiefs. I mean, I really thought the Steelers were going to give them more of a fight. They didn't get it done. The Chiefs won pretty easily. And the Ravens and Texans, oh my God. I really thought that the Texans had a chance to pull that game off before it started, but Baltimore just dominated them and they blew them out. And then the Thursday night game, Bears and Seahawks, that game was ugly, but the Seahawks were able to pull it out in the end. Moving on to the Saturday games, Chargers and Patriots. The Chargers did what they had to do. They went on the road, they beat a bad team, and now they have a chance to get the 5 seed in the playoffs. Moving on to one of the games of the week, Bengals and Broncos. I knew this game was going to come down to the end. The Bengals missed a field goal and the Broncos had a chance to win it, but they couldn't get it done, and Cincinnati got it done in the end. Next up, Rams and Cardinals. This game came down to the end. I really thought the Rams were going to beat them pretty easily, but they still ended up getting the win. Next up, Cowboys and Eagles. Eagles blew them out. There's not much to say about this game, and I believe they solidified the 2 spot in the NFC. Moving on to the Bucks and Panthers. Again, the Bucks did what they had to do. They knew that they know that the division is still on the line coming into the last week of the season. So I think they get it done. Moving on to the Bills and Jets. We smoked them. The Jets are not a good team. Aaron Rodgers needs to consider retiring. They need to consider trading Davante Adams, or I'm not sure if he's a free agent, but just let him walk, or maybe try and get draft picks for him. I'm not too sure, but they got to do something, and they're already looking for a head coach, so they're just not good right now. Moving on to the Colts and Giants. What a disappointing loss for the Colts. They're playing a bad team. I know they were on the road, but you're fighting for your playoff spot, and you just couldn't get it done. So now their season's over, and they need to look forward to next year. Moving on to the Raiders and Saints. The Raiders got the win, and they just keep pushing themselves further and further away from a good draft pick, and that's not good because they really need a quarterback going into next year. Moving on to the Jaguars and Titans. Again, another game with 2 bad teams. The Jaguars got it done at home, and everything's getting kind of shuffled up in the top 5 draft picks for next year, so we'll see who ends up getting that number 1 pick. Moving on to the Dolphins and Browns. Dolphins did what they had to do to stay alive. That's what I thought the Colts were going to do and make it more of a tight race. But it's going to come down to the Broncos, Dolphins, and Bengals. So we'll see who gets that 7th spot because that's who the Bills are going to end up playing. So I'm looking forward to seeing who's going to take it this weekend. Moving on to the Vikings and Packers. Again, I thought this was going to be one of the games of the week. And the Vikings took a lead and they kind of gave it up towards the end of the 4th quarter. And I thought Green Bay was going to have a shot to win, but the Vikings ended up pulling it off and they got the win. Moving on to the Sunday night game, Atlanta and Washington. This game was kind of crazy. I thought Atlanta was going to win it with that field goal at the end. It ended up looking good, but it was short and Washington ended up winning in overtime. Moving on to the Monday night game, Lions and Niners. Dan Campbell didn't even have to start his starters because win or lose, it didn't matter because whoever wins this Sunday night game coming up between the Lions and Vikings is going to determine who gets the 1 seed and wins the division and gets the bye week. So huge game coming up for both teams, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. So with that being said, I did end up going 14-2 this week. My only 2 losses were the Steelers on Christmas Day and the Colts. I really thought they were going to win and keep their playoff hopes alive, but they choked and they're officially eliminated. But let's see what I can do this week. This is my final week to go 16-0. It's probably going to be the hardest week because, like I said, I'm not too sure who to pick based off of teams benching their players, but we'll see what happens. Starting off with Saturday's game. First up, Browns and Ravens. I got the Ravens. They're at home. They're fighting for their division, and I think they win easily. Moving on to what I think is one of the games of the week, Bengals and Steelers. This game obviously means a lot for both teams. The Bengals need this to stay in the playoff hunt, but the Steelers need this to potentially win their division if the Ravens somehow lose to the Browns. But if not, they're looking at the 5 seed, which is, I think, the best seed to have going up. They'll be going up against the Texans, and the Texans are injured right now. We know about their 2 receivers down, Diggs and Dell. And I just think they have a better chance of winning the first round of the playoffs going up against Houston versus maybe slipping and going up against Baltimore or even Buffalo. So it's going to be exciting. I'm going to take the Bengals. Moving on to the Bills and Patriots. I'm going to take the Bills, but it's going to be a close game. The Patriots are still going to play their players, but the Bills, I think we're only going to play our guys for maybe 1 drive, maybe 2 drives, but it's pretty much kind of like a preseason game, the way they're setting our team up, because we don't have anything to play for. We already locked in the 2 seed, but I still think we managed to squeak it out. Next up, Eagles and Giants. Another similar situation to the Bills and Patriots. The Eagles are going to rest their starters, but I still think they get the win in the end. Next up, Bears and Packers. The Packers are still fighting for the 5 seed. They're kind of battling it out right now with Washington, so I think they get this win against the Bears. Next up, Panthers and Falcons. Falcons choked last week against Washington. Now they're sitting behind Tampa Bay for the division lead. They absolutely have to win this game in order to even have a chance, and they're also going to need Tampa Bay to lose in order to win their division. Next up, Saints and Bucks. The Bucks are at home. They're going up against a bad team. The division's on the line. I think they win this game easily and eliminate Atlanta. Next up, Washington and Dallas. Washington's going to win this game easily. I'm not too sure who's going to get the 5 or 6 seed between them and Green Bay, but we'll see how it goes. Next up, Jags and Colts. This game doesn't mean anything. I'm just going to pick the Colts simply because they're at home. Next up, Texans and Titans. Titans are at home. I still think they're going to play their players. I think Houston might rest their players because they're trying to stay healthy going into the first round of the playoffs. So I'm going to take Tennessee on this one. Next up, Chiefs and Broncos. Broncos are at home. They should have beat the Chiefs the first time. Chiefs are also resting their starters, so I think Denver wins this one and they get that 7th seed in the playoffs. Next up, Niners and Cardinals. Also another game that doesn't mean anything. I'm going to take the Niners though on the road. They still are playing their players even with Brock Purdy out. I think Josh Dobbs can get it done. Next up, Dolphins and Jets. I'm not even sure if the Dolphins are going to start Tua again this week. I know he didn't play last week against Cleveland. They ended up getting the win. It wasn't pretty. Tyler Huntley's not all that great. But if Tua's out, I'm actually going to take the Jets. But if he plays, then I'm going to take Miami. Next up, Seahawks and Rams. They already said the Rams are benching the majority of their starters. I did see that Seattle has a couple of guys that are still playing for incentives like Geno Smith and DK Metcalf. So I'm going to pick Seattle in this one. Next up, Chargers and Raiders. Like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be between the Chargers and Steelers most likely who gets that 5 seed. So I'm going to pick the Chargers in this one. And moving on to the big game of the week, Sunday Night Football, Vikings and Lions. We already know whoever wins this game gets that first round bye and the number 1 seed. But whoever loses goes to the 5 seed and most likely going to play the NFC South winner, which is the Bucks or the Falcons. But I'm going to take the Vikings in this one. I know it's going to be, or I know it's a bit of an upset pick, but I think they pull it out in the end. That's going to be it for me this week. It's a tough week to do picks based off of some of the teams resting their starters, but it is what it is. It's my final week to see if I can be perfect. Let me just give you a recap of my teams that I picked. Ravens, Bengals, Bills, Eagles, Packers, Falcons, Bucks, Washington, Colts, Titans, Broncos, Niners, Dolphins, Seahawks, Chargers, and Vikings. So we'll see what happens. We'll see who squeaks into the playoffs. We'll see if there's any upsets or who gets eliminated. But good luck to your team this week, except for the Patriots. You guys can go to hell and go Bills.